Hello, podheads, and welcome back to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. I am your host for today, Kate Carter.
And I'm Kylie Colwell.
And I'm Holly Spear.
No, you're not.
I know I read my name on the Zoom thing and I read Holly Spear. This is Holly Lamra.
Formerly known as Holly Spear.
I can't get it right.
All right, podheads. So I'm just going to dive right into today's story. In April of 2012, a man drove his red pickup truck into the mountains outside of a small town in Washington state and parked it near a trailhead. At first, there wasn't really anything unusual about it. People parked there all the time. The area was popular with hikers, campers, and anyone who was looking to spend a few hours out in the woods. But as days passed, the truck never moved, and eventually investigators would discover that whoever had driven it wasn't out there for a hike after all. At the same time, a completely different mystery was unfolding just a few miles away. A house had burned, a family had vanished, and detectives were trying to piece together what happened inside the home before the fire started. The deeper they dug, though, the stranger things became. Witnesses described a husband and father who had spent years disappearing into the mountains for a project that nobody seemed to fully understand. There were rumors about survivalism, stories about a hidden structure somewhere in the wilderness, and eventually investigators uncovered a collection of homemade videos that raised more questions than answered. And honestly, when I first started reading about this case, I assumed it was going to be a pretty straightforward story, a fire, a missing family, investigation, and maybe a suspect. Instead, I ended up going down one of the weirdest rabbit holes we've ever covered because this case somehow manages to be a family tragedy, a survivalist mystery, a manhunt, a psychological puzzle all at the same time. The further that you get into this story, the more you realize that almost nothing is about simple as it first appears. And some of the most important parts of this case actually happened years before anyone knew a crime had been committed. This is the story of Peter Keller. Okay, so before we get into Peter Keller himself, Keller, I think we need to talk about where the story takes place because North Bend isn't just a setting in this case. In a lot of true crime stories, the town is basically like the backdrop of the story. You can move the crime somewhere else and the story would pretty much stay the same. It's not really true in this situation because if Peter Keller had lived in like, I don't know, downtown Chicago or Miami or something, like a city, I don't think this story would have ever happened the way it did. So, North Bend is a town that is about 30 miles east of Seattle, Washington. And it's one of those places where civilization and wilderness kind of like combine together. If you look it up, it gives me like heavy Twilight vibes. The girls and boys that know. But you can stop for a coffee and then drive a few minutes down the road, and suddenly you're surrounded by a forest. There's mountains in every direction, and it kind of sounds like a dream for me. But if you've ever been to the Pacific Northwest, it's hard to explain just how massive and overwhelming some of these forests feel. The trees are huge, like absolutely enormous. The terrain is really, really steep. And once you're deep enough into the woods, it can be surprisingly easy to lose all sense of like where you are and get lost very easily. There's trails everywhere. There's logging roads that seem to go nowhere. There's hidden ridges, ravines, and miles of mountains where a person could easily disappear from view in a matter of minutes. But for most people, that's like part of the appeal. It's my dream. It's beautiful. People hike, camp, fish, mountain bike, whatever, spend entire weekends outside. But for someone who already had this fascination with like self-sufficiency and living off the grid, a place like North Bend probably feels like paradise. But Peter Keller, our main guy in our story, had that fascination. Like that was his dream. So one thing that becomes clear is that when you start digging through interviews and statements and his own recordings, yes, his own recordings, it's that Peter wasn't just interested in camping. He wasn't the guy who like bought a tent, spent the weekend in a woods. He seemed genuinely motivated about this idea of like removing himself from modern life. He talked about not wanting to work, not wanting to pay bills, not wanting to deal with responsibilities, and just having a simpler life. And to be fair, most of us have probably had moments where we've joked about quitting our jobs a million times, disappearing somewhere. Usually that lasts, it's like a fantasy. It lasts like 10 minutes, and then you remember you enjoy the little things like air conditioning, grocery stores, Wi-Fi. But Peter, however, didn't seem to view this as a joke. The more you look at his life, the more it appears that he was slowly building this alternate reality for himself and a place where he didn't really have to participate in a normal life anymore. A place where he could have his own rules, a place where nobody could tell him what to do. And while that all might sound harmless at first, it starts becoming a lot more concerning because you then realize how much time, money, effort, like things go into investing to making that fantasy real. So, what's fascinating is that the people who knew Peter generally didn't describe him as like some conspiracy theorist who spent every conversation like ranting about the government. You know, like a lot of people we see that want to live off grid are very strong-willed and motivated by that like persona of themselves. And in fact, one of the reasons this case is unsettling is because there aren't really a lot of stories about Peter behaving in a way that raised any red flags. Nobody was like, oh yeah, we saw that coming, or we knew something bad would happen. And usually, after a major crime, or especially the ones we cover on this podcast, we see red flags. And people, you know, it's always that interview of the best friend from middle school that remembers the warning signs. But here, that wasn't the case. What we do know is that Peter Keller worked various jobs throughout his life and, like many people, dealt with financial stress. And that detail does get overlooked a lot because the thing that Peter goes on to create, it's so much more interesting, but you have to think about the financial aspects of it too. Because Peter created a bunker, and we're going to get into that later. But building a bunker that just so happens to be a hidden structure in the mountains, it ain't cheap, y'all. The lumber costs money, concrete, fuel, tools, food storage. I mean, literally, like every trip to the woods, it all costs money. You know, he wasn't just building like a treehouse. He was building something more, much bigger and elaborate. And it raises that question that you immediately think, like, this dude was in financial stress to begin with. How is his wife not seeing all of this happening? Imagine that you're married to someone and they are spending years disappearing into the woods. Maybe they tell you they're hiking. Maybe they're working on a project. Maybe they're camping. Maybe they can explain some of the financial like stuff away, like the expenses, but eventually there has to be some type of conversation of like, where is this money going and why is it going, you know? Unfortunately, because Lynette never got the chance to tell her side of the story, we are now trying to reconstruct those years through like different fragments, which is frustrating. There are entire conversations, obviously, that only Peter and his wife Lynette knew, and we will only hear from his side, or so you think. So, by the early 2000s, Peter had already begun working on what would become his secret mountain project. And when I say secret, I don't mean just hidden from the public, I mean hidden from everyone. Over the next several years, Peter would haul materials deep into the wilderness and slowly construct a structure that became more sophisticated with every year that went by. The project would consume a huge amount of his time, require careful planning, and involve countless trips into the mountains. Yet, despite all of that effort, almost no one had any idea of what he was building. Which, the more I think about it, is weird because building something in secret for a few weeks is like, sure, that's one thing, you know, hard to not get caught, you know, if you're building something for a few weeks. Building something in secret for 8 years is nuts. Like, that's crazy. I can keep secrets, don't get me wrong, but like, probably not past a year.
And you might have already said this, but this is like public land, or is this
This is out just in the mountains of Washington State. So yes.
like a
Well, it's a
national
state park.
forest?
Yeah,
A state park. Okay. I guess it's very remote, so nobody like
very
steps
remote.
on it and
So this was going on for 8 years. building something like 8 years, the way I was thinking about it too, like that's a kid that goes from elementary to high school, like in those 8 years. You could go to college, get your master's degree in less than 8 years. And while all of that was happening around him, Peter Keller was making a trip to the mountains every single weekend. And he started building this separate reality that he always wanted. So before Peter was this man hiding in the woods, before the search teams and SWAT officers and news helicopters showed up, before there was a hidden bunker, there was a family that was living in North Bend, Washington. And that's where this story has to start because Lynette and their daughter, Kayleen, Kaylene, Keller, were not just like side characters in this story. These two people, along with Peter, were people who had their lives taken. And if we rush past who they were just to get to the creepy bunker part, we're doing exactly what a lot of these cases do, where we just let the story become about the killer and not the victims. So, Mommy Lynette Louise Rocha Keller was born on May 28th, 1970, in Paloma, California, along with her twin brother, Gene. Detail matters because Gene becomes one of the family members who later tries to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. And I think it helps you understand that Lynette came from this close family long before she ever became Peter Keller's wife. She spent her years growing up and her childhood in Laguna Hills, California. And she later moved with her family to Aloha, Oregon, which is where she graduated from high school in the late 1980s. So before North Bend, before Peter, before any of this, Lynette was a California and Oregon girl, and she had siblings. She had parents, family traditions, and she had her own entire life that had nothing to do with the man that eventually would destroy it. And from everything I've found out about Lynette, she was a very creative, hands-on person. She enjoyed things like scrapbooking and crafts. And she would sell her work at fairs and online in little craft shows. But she wasn't just creative, she was also really good at making things. She combined colors and textures, did scrapbooks, cards, invitations, like you name it. Her sister Kimberly later said that those creations became part of what the family had left of her, which is cute. Lynette also loved cooking, playing cards, and according to her family, being a mom was always one of her biggest dreams. Lynette's sister Kimberly also described her as an introvert whose focus was on her family, and Lynette's family stayed close even while everybody started to like spread out outside of California. So they still gathered for holidays, they still showed up for each other, and in 2010, Lynette and Kimberly even went to the Giving Trees, which is in North Bend, and they chose names, like this is just an example, they chose names of families that were in need and bought gifts for them. And that's something that they did as a tradition every year. So that kind of just was one of the things that stands out if you read certain articles that like Lynette and Kayleen, not so much Peter, because you'll find out why later, but they had this thing where they like to take on projects every year and give back to communities or give back to people. And so that's just like a little hint of telling you who they were, even though they had lots of financial stress. So that's just another thing. Anyways, Lynette, she was quiet, sure, family-centered, yep, but she was actively trying to raise her daughter to be thoughtful and have like a wonderful life. So Kayleen, only child. Kayleen Nicole Keller was born on June 28th, 1993 in Portland, Oregon, and moved to Washington when she was still young. By 2011, she had graduated from Mount Si High School in North Bend, and at the time of her death, she was attending Bellevue College. She cared about nature and the environment. She loved spending time outdoors with her friends and her dog. And her biggest interest in life was computer gaming technology. Again, this is like the kind of details you don't really want to rush through, but she was 18 years old. She was at that exact age where your childhood isn't yet behind you, but you're starting to become an adult and branch out. And she was thinking about what kind of future she wanted. So Kayleen's interest in gaming was not just like a teenager who played video games at night. She was interested more so in like game design, and she had shown interest in attending a place called DigiPen Institute of Technology, which is in Redmond. It's a pretty established school for like computer science, technology, animation, video production, video game production. And Kayleen's boyfriend, Carson Brammer, later talked about the worlds they used to explore together through games and how Kayleen liked playing like this to escape reality, which you will find in a lot of gamers.
It's like still pretty early to have that interest and also be a girl. It's probably rare, more rare.
Yeah, she was probably one of the OG like game because she wasn't just a gamer, she wanted to do design of
Yeah,
gaming.
yeah.
She was a good nerd. I don't think there's bad nerds, so I don't know why I said that, but like she was a nerd in a good way. I don't know why I said that again. So, boyfriend Carson said that in real life, Kayleen was a gentle and kind soul and was the type of person who would save spiders instead of killing them, which I love that description. So, Lynette's family absolutely adored Kayleen. Their grandmother said that Kayleen was the first grandchild and first great grandchild. And so the family saw her as like the princess, which is 1,000% what Millie is. When Kayleen graduated from high school in 2011, the family all gathered together to cheer her on, and they were excited because this was like a big step for the rest of her life. Her family wanted her to continue with school, but Kayleen was not in like a huge rush to jump into college. She kind of wanted to take a break year. She, at some point later on, obviously, when things go down, a scholarship is placed in her memory. And the scholarship was supposed to help kids in tech get scholarships to college and stuff like that. So that's just a cute little side piece. So now Peter, our main dude, Peter, Daddy Peter. So Peter Keller was a little harder to write in the same warmth, fuzzy way. And because much of what's out there about him is not personality based, and if it is, it's kind of like filtered by the case, like it wasn't like he was a monster or anything, but there's nothing that's like he was a wonderful, gentle soul because of what he did. So Daddy Peter was born in 1970, the same year as his wife, Lynette, and by 2012, he was 41 years old. He lived with Lynette and Kayleen in the house in North Bend. He worked at a job for a company in a town called Preston. And he seemed normal enough that, like, Lynette's family later said they didn't believe anything was wrong. Gene, which is Lynette's twin brother, said that when he spoke with Lynette shortly before the event that occurred, she seemed happy, gave no signs that, like, anything was wrong between her and Peter. And that's important because this isn't something that, like, the family saw the red flags, or there was, like, public unraveling with their relationship. At least from the outside, Lynette, Peter, and Kayleen were all living normal lives. But, of course, there were pieces of Peter that people did not notice, even if they did not know, what those pieces could add up to. Court documents would later describe Peter as reclusive, and that he had a fascination with things like trains and guns. He had a survivalist mentality, and he had a harsh, and this is a quote, harsh distaste for authority, which I feel like can kind of tell you what type of person he might be. My favorite part was the fascination with trains, though. So Peter's own family reportedly had not heard from him in months. But even then, there's like this big difference in like, oh, he's reclusive and into guns, and then what's about to happen. This is where things start to get a little uncomfortable because sure, the Keller family may have not known everything, but they did know something though. Kayleen's boyfriend Carson reportedly told investigators that he had learned that Peter was building some type of weapon and supply in a fort in the woods. Weapons and supply in a fort in the woods. That one detail kind of changes the way I looked at this case because it meant that Peter's secret life wasn't fully secret, like someone knew something, even if it wasn't full scale. People knew like bits and pieces, maybe not enough to think he had a weird survivalist hobby, maybe some like fort or hideout, but not enough to understand the scale of what he was building or planning. So by the time we get close to April of 2012, the Keller family looks normal from one angle and then kind of starting to get unsettling from another. Lynette is creating art, staying close with her family, cooking, crafting, focusing on her daughter. Kayleen's now 18 years old, out of high school. She's taking some classes on the side, spending time with her boyfriend Carson. doing the whole games thing, being out in nature. And Peter is living in that same house with them while also disappearing every single weekend into the woods. There, he is stockpiling supplies, recording private videos, and building something that the people around him only partially understood. So, what makes Daddy Peter different isn't that he loved the outdoors, it's that somewhere along the way, the outdoors stopped being what he visited and slowly became where he wanted to live. Investigators later estimated that Peter spent close to 8 years working on what they initially thought was a fort before it ever became eventually an elaborate underground bunker everyone knows about today. That means that this project most likely started sometime around 2004 when Kayleen was only 11 years old. While Peter was beginning his secret project, Kayleen was still in elementary school, like I said before. So by the early 2000s, the Keller family had settled into what most people thought were like a pretty ordinary life. The mom and dad, Peter and Lynette, had been together for years. Kayleen was growing up. There wasn't much to separate them from everybody around them. Peter was a full-time machinist, and Lynette was a stay-at-home mom with Kayleen. If you had driven past their house on any random Tuesday, you wouldn't have given it any second thought. Peter, like I said, seemed to enjoy spending time outside, but it was not like you couldn't figure out when that started. Like, you can't pin it down of when that started to happen. Friends and family always described him as somebody that like wanted to be outside, but they never said he wanted to leave society behind. And there wasn't like some drastic conversation where he declared, I'm becoming a survivalist or whatnot. Instead, it looked like over the years, he had just become more fascinated with spending his free time by himself. And at first, there's not really anything, it's a little strange, but it's not like red flags. The area in North Bend is filled with hikers, hunters, campers, people who simply enjoy that nature aspect. And if Peter said he was heading to the woods for a day, nobody really questioned it. Just imagine like Lynette is mentioning to a friend like, oh, where's Peter? Oh, he's just out hiking today. That was his thing to do. Kayleen at some point had told her boyfriend that her dad was building a fort out in the woods. And then Carson would later tell investigators like he heard it from Kayleen. But the way that she described it was weird, but not dangerous or alarming. It just sounded like there was another project happening. And it's tempting to see, once you find out information, to look back and be like, oh, they should have known. When in real time, like, it's not a red flag kind of thing. Even Lynette's twin brother, Gene, would later tell reporters that when he looked back at like family gatherings, he remembered Peter as a loving father and like a friend. He even said that when Lynette called him the night before the events occurred, she sounded perfectly normal. Like, she never once mentioned being afraid or hinted at something being wrong. So not long after Kayleen graduated high school, Peter's weekends started becoming even more focused. Like, he would be gone for 48 hours at a time. And Peter had started working on what he had casually referred to as the fort. And based on what Carson later told investigators, that's more or less how like Kayleen and Lynette thought about it too. By the late 2000s, Peter had settled into a routine. During the week, he would be working his normal job. He was a machinist at a company called Solar Systems in Preston, which is like just a small community outside of North Bend. And he was known at work to be quiet, mainly kept to himself. Years earlier, Lynette had actually suffered a workplace injury, and it had left her partially disabled, and she was now receiving state disability benefits, so that's why she was a stay-at-home mom. So Peter, therefore, handled all of the family's finances, and court documents later revealed that he actually controlled multiple bank accounts. Lynette did not know about these other bank accounts. They were all under Peter's name. This is slightly red flaggish behavior for me, but Peter controlled those finances, and so Lynette would occasionally call her own dad whenever she needed money because Peter wouldn't always give it to her. So like Lynette had to ask for money, which like some, some relationships, that's how it is. The man controls it or the wife controls it, whatever. But to have to ask, and if you say no, you then go to your dad, like makes me sad. Like they're grown, they're done grown, they're in their 40s.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, not a crazy red flag, more so just like Peter has a tight grip on the family's finances kind of situation. What it is weird is that Peter had apparently told his wife that he was building a like substantial amount for their retirement. And family members later told investigators that Lynette believed Peter had saved enough money for them that they might retire as a millionaires. So that's a big note that if your husband's telling you like we're going to be millionaires when I retire, I would be thrilled about that. I would also want to see the proof. Now,
Yeah.
whether Peter genuinely believed it or that was just another way of keeping control over the finances isn't really clear. But it's definitely one of those details that makes you wonder how much of Peter's inner life was hidden from, people even like his own wife. According to those around him, at some point, this fort that Peter was building got called Camp Keller. The way it would go is Peter would leave on a Saturday morning around after breakfast around like 10 a.m. and he wouldn't return home until Sunday around 4 p.m., like right before dinner. So he'd be gone for 2 days by himself every weekend. Again, nobody questioned it though because everybody knew Peter liked spending time outside. Everyone also knew about Camp Keller. Boyfriend Carson had even spent enough time with Peter that he told investigators later on Peter had even shown him his gun collection, which included guns that he kept at both the house and Camp Keller. So some of those guns were pistols, large caliber rifles, and even AR-15s. So like pretty hefty supply. But again, nothing really raises alarm bells. Plenty of people these days, especially in the mountains of Washington state, owned guns. By the beginning of 2011, the Keller family had reached one of those stages in life where families look forward to. Kayleen had graduated from high school, she was taking college classes, her and Carson had been dating for over a year at this point, and Peter started documenting his trips to the mountains, which is like a cool, little camcorder kind of thing. And obviously looking back now as like crime junkies ourselves, love a good videotape of things. That's just give me every single night I watch a documentary. So like give me all the live footage. I'm cool for it. Now, these weren't polished videos by any means. He wasn't like making it for an audience or anything. They were more of like a personal journal, which I love even more. And sometimes he filmed the work he was doing, and other times he just sat in front of the camera and talked. He talked about the weather, the progress he was making, how he wanted a simpler life. Years later, investigators would end up watching every single minute of them, trying to determine whether Peter had left any clue explaining why he did what he did.
Well, before, a while ago, I used to sit here and think, this whole thing is just crazy at times, and then I'd think about it, and it would make sense, and it's like, okay, this is what I gotta do. But, now, I guess with time, I just think that way all the time, that this is what I gotta do. I don't even question it anymore. It just seems like everything makes so much sense now. Just the more I've thought about it, the more I understand it. I don't really feel bad about it. It's just the way it is. Certain things happen that cause this to happen. So, just kind of accepted it and just rolling with it.
By April of 2012, Peter had been living the same double life for years. During the week, went to work, mountains on the weekend. Nobody knew, though, that those routines were about to come to an end. On Friday, April 20th, 2011, started out like any other workday, but investigators would later discover that Peter made a stop after work that caught their attention. Peter had driven to a Chase bank in town and withdrew $6,200 in cash. By itself, not illegal, not really unusual. People withdraw cash for all kinds of reasons. The significance only became clear later on, when detectives realized that the money had never been deposited back into any of the family accounts. So, continuing on with the day, Peter also spoke with people at work in a way that, in hindsight, sounded very different than it did at the time. One coworker remembered Peter saying, like, "Oh, I might not be back next week, or the week after that, or maybe I'll never come back." Which, of course, like everyone just thought he was joking. Investigators would eventually learn that Peter had also arranged to be away from work for several days. He had taken Monday off, along with Thursday and Friday of the following week. The next evening, on Saturday, April 21st, another small detail quietly slipped into place. Sometime that night, Peter turned off his cell phone, and it would never be turned back on again. And at the time, no one noticed. Why would they? People lose service in the mountains all the time. Batteries die. Phones get left in cars. It's like one of those details that only became meaningful later. While Peter was making this preparation, there was no evidence that seemed unusual in the Keller home. Family members who had spoken with Lynette in the days leading up to that weekend told investigators that she wasn't expressing fear to them. She never talked about leaving Peter or hinted that something was wrong. As far as anyone knew, life was continuing exactly how it always had. But the timeline became much more precise from this point forward, because beginning on Sunday, April 22nd, 2012, Peter Keller's movements would set off a chain of events that would ultimately bring hundreds of law enforcement officers into the mountains outside of North Bend, Washington. Sunday evenings are pretty forgettable. People are, finishing their weekend duties, doing laundry, getting kids ready for school, making dinner, dreading Monday morning. And on April 22nd, 2012, everything started out no differently in North Bend, Washington. It was a quiet Sunday, but then at some time around, or from what we know, after 6:30 p.m., smoke was spotted coming from a house on North Bend Way. A neighbor called 911 to report a house fire. The call itself wasn't really unusual. House fires happen all the time. And as firefighters forced their way into the home, they began searching room by room, just as they would during any structured fire. Smoke filled up pretty much all of the house already, making visibility difficult, and the crews had to work carefully as they searched for potential occupants. During that search, they located 2 people inside of the residence, and at first there was no way to know what exactly had happened to them, other than the fact that they were already deceased. I mean, in fires, victims can die from burns, smoke inhalation, carbon monoxide, and firefighters had seen every one of those scenarios before. So nothing about the initial dispatch suggested that this would be like any other different case. Once the fire was brought under control and investigators were able to begin examining the scene more closely, that's when it became immediately clear this wasn't some tragic house fire. Both of the victims had suffered close-range gunshot wounds to the head before the fire had even begun. The fires hadn't killed them, someone else had. The victims were identified as 41-year-old Lynette Keller and her 18-year-old daughter, Kayleen. In a matter of minutes, what had started out as routine fire investigation now had become a double homicide. Detectives arriving at the scene immediately began asking what is usually one of the first questions in any homicide investigation: who was supposed to be in the house? They knew Lynette lived there, they knew Kayleen lived there, but they also knew one more member of the family was nowhere to be found. Enter Daddy Peter Keller. He wasn't among the victims, he wasn't outside speaking with firefighters, and he hadn't been seen by any of the neighbors, watching the crews battle the fire or anything. So at that point, investigators couldn't say whether Peter had left before the fire, maybe he was another victim somewhere else, maybe he was the person they needed to find. All they knew is that he was missing. So that uncertainty right there kind of changes the pace of investigation, because while crime scene techs are at the house documenting, every room, shell casing, burn pattern, stuff like that, every piece of the evidence that had survived the fire, there were other detectives spread out across North Bend looking for more answers. Some of those detectives began notifying relatives that Kayleen and Lynette had been killed. Others headed to Peter's workplace to find out if he was maybe there or where he had last been seen. And so now every conversation matters, because investigators weren't just trying to figure out what happened inside the Keller home, they were also trying to figure out where Peter Keller was. Was he in danger himself, or whether everyone else needed to be worried about him? So before the night was over, detectives would learn that Peter had recently withdrawn those thousands of dollars in cash. He also arranged to be away from work for several days, made unusual comments to his coworkers about possibly never coming back, and had also turned off his cell phone the night before. None of those facts, standing alone, proved anything, but as investigators started laying those pieces next to each other, they slowly started to realize that they probably weren't looking for just a missing husband anymore. They were looking for a man who appeared to have vanished just as his wife and daughter were murdered. And somewhere in those few, frantic first hours, the investigation shifted from trying to understand, a horrible crime scene to answering a much more urgent question now, because where had Peter Keller gone? The investigation moved quickly that night because detectives knew that they couldn't afford to lose time. If Peter Keller had been inside the house when the fire started and somehow escaped, every hour made it less likely that someone was going to find him alive. On the other hand, if Peter had anything to do with the murders, every passing hour gave him this bigger, head start. Those two are very different investigations, but during the first few hours, detectives had no way really knowing which one they were going to be dealing with. While crime scene investigators continued working inside the burned home, other investigators began pulling things like bank records, phone records, vehicle information, hoping that something would point them in the right direction before Peter disappeared. As detectives continued interviewing the people closest to the Keller family, another name kept surfacing. That one we've talked about before, a place called Camp Keller. Nobody described it as a bunker. Nobody described it as this underground hideout. They simply referred to it as Camp Keller, a place Peter spent time in the mountains. But investigators quickly realized that this wasn't just some place Peter had visited once or twice. It was something he had been returning to for years, which obviously kind of changed the direction of the investigation. Detectives now had a reason to believe that Peter might have a destination to go to. But the problem was that no one seemed to know where Camp Keller actually was. People knew it existed, but Peter had never disclosed to a single person where the location was. As investigators dug deeper into Peter's background over the next several hours, they also learned that he had spent years collecting firearms and survivalist supplies. Again, none of that makes him a murderer, but detectives weren't looking at those details individually anymore. They were trying to understand Peter as a whole, and the more that they learned, the more they began to suspect if Peter had intentionally disappeared, and maybe he had been preparing for that disappearance for a long time.
Today we're hauling up a 55-pound pack, basically a big bottle full of beans that's about 45 pounds, and some winemaking stuff, and then just the weight of the gun in the pack. So, a little lighter than what I have been doing. Doing pretty good. Really got a lot of stuff up. I mean, basically I can last months up here without ever leaving. I've got propane, gasoline, food, soap, all supplies. So, really set right now.
Back at the Keller home, investigators continued to process what was left of the fire scene. Despite the damage, they recovered evidence showing that the fire itself had likely been intentionally set, which is obviously a huge deal. Detectives found gasoline containers inside of the home, including one placed on top of a stove with the burner on. So that obviously led investigators to believe someone had attempted to ignite the fire in a way that would eventually consume the house. It's not a mistake to do that. But instead of destroying every single piece of evidence, the fire had done something Peter probably never expected. It ended up preserving enough of the scene for investigators to determine that both Lynette and Kayleen had been shot before the flames had ever started. And by the time the detectives finally left the Keller home during the early morning hours of April 23rd, they had reached one conclusion that they felt increasingly confident about. Peter Keller hadn't disappeared because he was another victim. He had disappeared because he didn't want to be found. Okay, so the next morning of Monday, April 23rd, investigators are like, where's Peter? This is now what we've got to do, what we've got to find. So one thing investigators also began looking into was Peter's car, which was a red pickup truck. At that point, they didn't really know whether he was still driving it, whether he had like abandoned it somewhere, or, someone might report seeing it. But patrol officers throughout the area were given descriptions of both Peter and the truck, and law enforcement agencies across the region were alerted that detectives were trying to locate a potential homicide suspect who was also believed to be armed. Back at the police station, investigators were working hard to try to figure out where this Camp Keller was located. At some point, someone remembered seeing photographs Peter had taken of the camp, which, like, at first doesn't sound really helpful. A few pictures of trees and a campsite wasn't going to narrow down thousands of acres of forest, but detectives weren't interested in the obvious parts of the photographs. They were interested in everything happening in the background. So investigators found the pictures, enlarged them, and studied literally every corner, anything that could have helped them identify the location. Was there a distinctive ridge line? Was there a power line, a road, a building, anything? And eventually someone noticed something. In the distance, barely visible in one of the photographs, an investigator believed they could make out part of the North Bend Premium Outlets, which wasn't much, but it was the first time they finally had a direction to kind of follow in this case. The photograph had done something Peter certainly never intended it to do. Without realizing it, he had photographed part of the landscape that was beyond his camp, and that tiny mistake gave investigators a starting point. Detectives began comparing the angle of the buildings, nearby power lines visible in the background, and the surrounding ridge lines. They weren't trying to identify the exact location yet. They were just trying to get an answer to the question of where could someone have taken this picture? And the more people that became involved, the search slowly narrowed. Detectives believed that the photographs had been taken somewhere or near a place called Rattlesnake Ridge, which is a heavily wooded area just outside of North Bend, and it was very popular with hikers, mountain bikers, and your outdoor enthusiasts. So this ridge covered hundreds of acres, and simply knowing Peter was somewhere on Rattlesnake Ridge didn't make finding him easy. It was definitely better than searching every mountain in Western Washington, though. So the area around Rattlesnake Ridge is really popular. Every year, thousands of hikers, trail runners, mountain bikers, you name it, make their way up those trails. On a nice weekend, the parking lot at the trailhead could be filled up before lunchtime. It almost seemed impossible that someone could spend years hauling lumber, concrete, propane, food, tools, or what else into the woods without someone eventually asking him questions. And yet that's exactly what Peter did. At some point, another clue arrived. After news coverage of murders spread throughout the community, several hikers had actually contacted the sheriff's office with something that they had remembered. Over the past year or two, they had noticed the same faded red pickup truck parked at the Rattlesnake Ridge trailhead over and over again. At the time, didn't mean much to them, but once Peter's truck was shown on the news, those old memories suddenly became incredibly important. And that was enough for investigators to bring in one of the most valuable resources they had, people called experienced trackers. This is not a Hollywood movie tracking where someone touches the dirt and instantly knows shit and knows where to go. These experienced trackers had spent years learning how to read terrain that most people would walk just, right past. Like a slightly bent bush or some moss that had been stepped on or crazy shit that a broken twig that shouldn't have been broken. I don't even know, soil compressed in a different way. Those are all different changes that can tell a story if you know how to read them. I do not, couldn't tell you any of that. To avoid attracting attention though, the trackers didn't march into the woods wearing tactical gear or anything. Instead, they dressed like ordinary hikers. Detectives knew that there was a very real possibility that if Peter was watching the trails through binoculars, or worse, through a rifle scope, he would immediately recognize a line of deputies hiking towards him. So the trackers blended in with everyone else using the trails that day and quietly slipped off the established paths once they reached the area investigators believed Peter had been using. And it didn't take long before they found out exactly what they were hoping for: boot prints. Not on the hiking trail itself, but leading away from it. The impression suggested that someone carrying a heavy backpack had repeatedly traveled off trail deeper into the woods where there were no marked routes for ordinary hikers. To anyone else, they might have looked like nothing more than a few footprints disappearing into the brush, but to the trackers, they were this confirmation that someone had been making the same trip again and again. And for the first time since Lynette and Kayleen had been found, investigators weren't working from theories anymore. They were following Peter's trail, and somewhere ahead of them, hidden beneath the trees, was whatever he had spent the last 8 years building.
Wow. You know what I'm loving so much about this already? Is he's so calculated and meticulous that he's going to spend 8 years building this, and then he's going to be so stupid.
Yeah.
It's so dumb at the same time to take a
Like,
picture of it with something in the background. Like, take the same, they can follow your footsteps out to this, like, cabin, this thing you built.
yeah.
Bunker.
We'll talk about it at the very end, but like, it took him 8 years to do whatever he did, and we're currently on day 2.5 of the investigation.
I love dumb criminals. That's so great.
Well, he told like the whole town what he was doing, just didn't say where it was.
Right, right. Like, go to a different state. If you're gonna do that, don't even do it. You did it in the same town. Anyways, okay, so the footprints didn't lead investigators to Camp Keller in a matter of minutes. In fact, they disappeared almost as quickly as they had appeared. The deeper they moved into the woods, the quieter everything became. Even though Rattlesnake Ridge is like this popular recreational area, it really doesn't take long to feel completely alone once you step off the established trails. There's thick vegetation in everywhere, pretty much in every direction. The terrain changes. You know, one minute you're walking across level ground, and the next you're climbing over fallen trees or navigating these steep slopes that are covered in loose rocks. So investigators knew that if Peter was watching them from a concealed position, he could probably see them long before they had any chance of seeing him. But investigators began to notice subtle signs that someone had traveled through the same area over and over again. There were certain sections of the wood that looked more worn down than everything else surrounding them. There were places where branches had been trimmed, you know, just enough to make it easier for one person carrying supplies to squeeze through without attracting attention. So the further that the tractor's investigators followed this sign, the more cautious everyone became. Detectives had to assume that Peter was armed, and they also knew he had spent years to think about, like, what was he going to do if someone ever came looking for him. They didn't know if he had set traps. They didn't know if he had built defensive positions. They didn't even know if he was alive or there, but they had to consider every possibility at this point. So at one point, the search team stopped completely. They had found something that didn't belong. They had found small pieces of weathered lumber. This like area of lumber looked like scraps rather than like normal pieces of wood. It looked like stuff that had been broken and discarded into a pile. And there was no obvious reason for that stuff to be there. And then a little further on, investigators noticed signs that someone had been carrying building materials through the forest. They weren't like finding enough to tell them that what exactly Peter had built, but they were finding enough to convince themselves that they were getting close. So eventually one of the trackers stopped by base of a steep hill and quietly motioned for others to come closer. At first glance, there didn't appear to be anything remarkable about the spot, but the longer investigators studied it, the more they began noticing the little things that didn't seem to belong together. There were logs lying across the hillside, and not like fallen, trees or anything like that, but literally horizontal, on a steep hill. Several appeared to have been there, placed intentionally. Moss had grown over them, so naturally they started like blend in perfectly together, but underneath that layer of growth, there was a subtle change. The earth had also looked different nearby. It was flatter than the surrounding slope, as if someone had reshaped that part of the hillside years earlier and then patiently allowed the forest to like reclaim it. As officers carefully repositioned themselves, as officers carefully repositioned themselves, the outline of what they were looking at slowly began to emerge. Hidden within the hillside was an entrance that had been camouflaged so effectively it was almost impossible to distinguish from the surrounding terrain. As it became immediately obvious that this wasn't something someone had built over the course of a few weekends, the amount of labor involved was overwhelming. Standing there in front of it, detectives began to appreciate something they fully hadn't understood until that moment. Peter Keller hadn't just built a place to escape to, he had spent nearly a decade creating a place that he believed no one else was ever going to find. Camp Keller wasn't just simply a campsite or a hunting shack the way that some people had imagined it. It was an elaborate underground shelter built directly into a mountainside, concealed so well that experienced investigators had nearly walked past it despite knowing what they were searching for.
But it took them how many days to find it?
This was done in one day.
Wah, wah.
Oh, boo. At the same time, however, the discovery of a shelter created a far more dangerous situation and problem. There was no indication that the structure had been abandoned, and so detectives couldn't tell whether Peter was inside, had he left already, was he quietly watching everyone from somewhere else. So rather than risking the lives of the deputies already on the mountain, investigators backed away from the entrance and began developing a plan. The King County Sheriff's Office requested its SWAT team, crisis negotiators, and additional tactical resources. Obviously, no one wanted to force their way into a bunker designed and built by a man who was believed to have murdered his wife and kid. But when they had finally found Camp Keller, nobody was also naive enough to believe that the hardest part of the investigation was behind them. If Peter Keller was inside that bunker, the investigation was now entering its most dangerous phase. As officers quietly established a perimeter around the hillside, negotiators began discussing the safest way to make contact. There was no doorbell to ring, no driveway to pull into, no guarantee that Peter was even there. And at the same time, they couldn't rule out the possibility that Peter had been watching their every moment somewhere inside the bunker all along. The structure had been deliberately concealed, and Peter had chosen a location that gave him a huge tactical advantage. So everyone approaching from below would have to move uphill through the forest, while someone inside would be able to see everything below them. Eventually, officers decided that the safest course of action was to announce their presence, and Peter was given an opportunity to surrender. From a protective position, members of the SWAT team repeatedly identified themselves over a loudspeaker. They informed anyone inside the bunker that law enforcement had surrounded the area and ordered Peter Keller to come out with his hands visible. Announcements echoed through the trees. They were announced multiple times, and then everyone waited. And nothing happened. So the announcements were repeated again. And then, well, you'll just have to wait until next week's episode to hear what happened next.
You have got to be fucking kidding me.
What?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a two-parter. If you can't see the screen, I'm being flipped off by Kylie.
Wow. Kay did not inform us of this.
Why would I tell you it's a two-parter? I gotta give you you wouldn't be listening to my story.
Dang.
That's all I
Damn.
got for you today, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow, I can't stand you right now.
Are you pissed? Well, I haven't done
Yeah.
a two-parter in like a year.
Oh, no, I'm pissed because it's so good. I want to know.
I don't
Well,
even know how to like wrap this up. Usually we talk about like our thoughts on the case. Nothing to say
gonna have
yet.
you're gonna have to wait.
This better be, my thought is this better be a damn good bunker. 8 years? I better
Right?
see decor, baby. I better see electricity, ice machine, full kitchen,
Bidet.
A
bidet,
day.
full soaker tub.
Keurig coffee machine.
Yeah, I got high expectations.
Well, you're gonna have to wait. So we might as well just stop talking about it. We'll jump right into overtime. We had a theme to go over for, we love a good theme. So,
Things we never buy the cheap version of, and I would like to go at least the first item. I want to go first because I'm
Oh, I know what you're gonna say. I wanted to go first. Should we say it together?
I'm
Three,
Wait, wait,
two,
wait, wait, wait.
one. Oh,
Kate's gotta give us the premise. The
okay.
Yeah, hold
listeners.
on. Hold on. I've got anxiety right now. Okay, so what we're talking about for overtime today is what are things that none of us will ever, or just yourself, what are things that you're never going to buy the cheap version of? Like there's just some things in the world that no matter what happens, you're not going to buy the $1 thing, you're going to buy the $20 thing, or so on and so on. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an item, like a physical item. It could be things in general. I have a little list of things as well, but ladies, you would like to go first on this one. Do you think you have the same thing?
Yeah. And also, I forgot that you hadn't explained it yet, and I was just about to rattle off
Yes,
what.
yeah, you were
Okay.
very excited about
Okay.
it. So let me
Three.
count down and you
Okay.
guys say your thing at the same time.
Okay.
3, 2, 1, go.
Heinz
Toilet
ketchup.
paper.
What? Wait, excuse me. Kylie, what the fuck did you?
Yeah, wait, I'm
No,
sorry.
no, no. I don't even know what you said, Holly, but there's no way you said Heinz ketchup.
Toilet paper.
Okay,
Okay,
toilet
the
paper
first thing
is
on
on
my
my
list is toilet paper.
Maybe it should have been number one.
it's on my list and I have paper towels on there too.
No, 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 no. Heinz ketchup.
Okay, if I show up to your restaurant and you have fucking Hunt's or like great value ketchup, I'm walking out.
I understand, Kylie, but it's the fact that you thought you had the same thing as Holly.
I
The
didn't think
fact
that.
you
Holly,
think
I
that's
got you,
important
baby.
enough
I
over
got
toilet
you.
paper? Also, what? I don't eat ketchup, so I can't even agree with you.
Well, that's just weird itself. But okay, yes, I understand. Heinz is great. Toilet paper, though, I will always. That was an adult thing of me, though, because I was poor at one point and in college and literally had to go to Dollar Tree to get toilet paper. Like I had no money. Now I will spend the money.
Oh,
This is
even
the
when I
only
was
time that Kate's going to agree that I'm right over something between me and Kylie. This might be the only time.
We should re Are we recording? Yeah, we are, of course. So this is going to go down in history, Holly. Don't get your hopes up. It's never going to happen again.
I do know.
Okay. All right. Kylie, would you like to go next?
shoes in general. I need the arch support, my orthopedic, insoles, you know.
Yeah,
I'm not buying Amazon shoes. I'm not buying Shein shoes.
I used to.
They last like two wears,
Yeah.
I'm investing.
You're investing in your knee support and health.
My ankles,
Your
Okay.
future.
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, Holly.
You go next.
Okay. Peanut butter.
Are you a Jif or are you a Skippy?
Oh, get this, you guys. Get this. I'm a Jif girl, born and raised. Cameron will only let us have Peter Pan in the house.
Peter
Ew.
Pan.
The
Ew.
Peter Pan is the lowest. No, actually, I think is Skippy below Peter Pan.
I think Peter Pan is lower.
He will only let there be Peter Pan in the house. I have to sneak a jar in the back of the cabinet.
Y'all, and side note for listeners, their child's allergic to peanuts.
Oh yeah, we have to hide the peanut butter regardless.
Holly?
Um,
Holly
uh,
didn't do her research.
no, I did. I had one. Hold on, but now it's not even good. Now I feel like it
Right.
has to hit. I was gonna just say coffee.
Yeah, pass. Okay. No. Coffee. Okay, wait. Coffee at home or locations, like going to get coffee. Because
No, like
there's
I'm not gonna buy like the Walmart brand coffee. I'm gonna buy Folgers. I'm gonna buy something. I'm not gonna buy like great value pods for my Keurig.
I get that.
The taste is so important. Coffee's so important to me. I will buy the name brand.
Anything leather. If I see something and it says like pleather or vegan leather, okay, vegan leather, that's fake. That's plastic. That's pleather.
PETA, this is time for you to shut off the podcast if you're listening.
Okay, side note, it is better for the environment if you buy leather or real fur. That's gonna last way longer than it is to buy the plastic shit that's just gonna never biodegrade and end up in the landfill because
Or
it's not gonna last that long.
or It's actually not better because you're still killing the animal for its fur. Maybe just don't do any of it.
I didn't know you were vegan. Sorry.
I'm not, but I am an animal lover. I don't think I don't think I own a single leather thing or ever have. But I also don't think that's by choice. Like, I don't think it's like I'm choosing not to have leather. I think it's never been fit for my body.
You're doing eat Burke bags?
Oh
Huh.
shit.
So you just be wearing that shit.
Oh shit. Every day. Every day. Oh my God. I'm
Got
a
her
horrible
ass.
person. I'm a horrible person.
Water.
Damn it, Dunienberg. Damn. Yeah, you're right. I'm gonna cry myself to sleep tonight.
Oh yeah, the seats in your car. What are those?
Leather.
Yep.
Leather.
Go
God.
return it.
You know what? There's a lot of warranties right now on
Wait,
Telluride.
so are you against wearing the fur or
Mm,
like but you
no,
can eat meat.
right. I don't enjoy
What's
it
the
most of the time. I think it's more of I just really like animals, but I'm never not choosing to do stuff. I just feel really guilty when I do.
Okay.
I love cheeseburgers, but I love cows equally, if not more. I don't know. It's hard. It's a hard distinction. I have
Yeah,
to cook my own meat. I don't really like having other people's meat. Anyways, let's get up. My next thing on my list was meat. I'm always going to buy a higher priced meat.
I had that on my list too.
Like, I'm not, no offense, Winn-Dixie, but I'm not buying your meat. I'm going to Publix.
And I'm getting the Greenwise, I'm getting the organic chicken.
I am too. Oh, eggs.
Eggs are on my list. You guys are taking all my stuff.
Holly, you didn't have a list.
Yeah, I did. Milk and eggs were on my list.
Oh, milk too. Yeah.
That's her grocery list.
It's, she's just reading her grocery list.
Milk, bread,
Vegetables.
eggs. I don't
Coffee,
know if I
toilet
buy the
paper.
cheap version of much things. I don't know. Like,
This one could be controversial because I wasn't always like this, but hotels and Airbnbs, I used to be a bargain girl. I still am, actually. Actually, I'm going to take this all back. This is not me. I'm not a four class kind of girl. I love a good bargain, but I'm not going to be buying those $79 hotel rooms. You know, like I have to have at
whoa,
least
I didn't even know that was in the
security.
question.
I'm not
Never.
gonna drop $500 a night on a hotel, but you're not gonna catch me at the Best Western.
No, no. I've been traumatized enough.
There's tiers, and I'll stick to the middle. I mean, I
I'm
don't
a
need
good middle
fancy,
girl.
but
Yep.
you're not gonna catch me anywhere else. Like, no, I've walked out of places, you know?
Oh no, I've slept my ass in those places and thought I deserved this. You booked it. And then I came home with bed bugs.
Oh,
Yeah.
see,
Slept in my clothes on top of the comforters. Anyways, okay. Here's something that's not a physical item, but I understand now as an adult. If you're at a theme park buying the fast pass, I'm gonna pay money to buy the fast pass ticket now because I'm not standing with you peasants.
Anything that saves time and brings me comfort, I will gladly pay more
I'll
for.
do it. I will do it. Will you buy the plans for like TV programs that go without commercials?
100%. I show up to your house and you put on Netflix and you got commercials on, I'll log you into my account.
What is that, the free version?
You still pay money for the commercial one.
You can have your own little
I didn't
face on
even know they did
Netflix.
that.
Apparently they do. I just found out about it.
Mm,
Wow.
it does.
So you're probably the same person that do you buy like you play a game, you pay for the no ads.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'll test the game out on my phone. If I'm like, okay, I'm gonna keep playing this, I'll buy the no ad one. Sometimes I'll play a game for like a day or two and I'm never done with. I'm done with it.
I,
yeah, that's
I
fair.
can't tell you the last time I've ever played a game on my phone.
Oh, I was playing it just a minute ago.
I'm thinking like not even in college. I just
What?
don't have, because I
She just
don't,
doesn't, guys, she doesn't have the time. She
no,
doesn't have
I just
the time
don't
that
know
we
what
do.
free time is. I know that's what, I know you're making fun. I don't know what free time is.
She has kids. She doesn't know what games.
Not even that. Like in college, I had shit to do. Anyways, I don't have enjoy. That's whatever. Okay. Here's something that could be controversial, and I don't really care. I am a water concierge. Sir, I am a water.
Are you sure?
I love water. And so I will pay money to get that purified water. I do
Yeah.
not, every house that we live in, I don't know what it is. I can't drink water from a fridge.
Oh, I'm a snob. I can't. Actually, I can drink water from a fridge. That's not true. I will not drink water from a faucet under any
Oh,
circumstances.
absolutely not.
You guys know I hardly drink water in general.
You have a faucet of
Red Bull, yeah.
Red Bulls. Okay, my last thing that I have on my list is movie theater candy and popcorn. I will pay money to get food at the movie theater instead of bringing my own.
Oh, I that's the only reason I go to the movie theater is it's my favorite snack is popcorn.
Oh my God, it's and then you put the extra butter, Coke slushy with the popcorn.
I'm going tonight.
Are you?
No, but now I might.
Oh. But if you make popcorn at home, it's not the same.
It is when I do it.
Ooh,
You,
send me
you
My
can
favorite snack.
buy
I make them almost every night. I make popcorn almost every single night, just so you guys know.
you got to make it in the pot and you can buy the movie theater butter.
Holly, you live off of popcorn and energy drinks.
That's right.
How are you alive? You said that's right. You smoke cigarettes too? That would be a real good combination.
Yeah, I do not. I don't smoke cigarettes.
All right, Kylie, you got anything else?
I mean, I guess kind of on theme, butter. We'll only buy the Kerrygold butter.
Me too.
Oh, I love some Kerrygold.
Best.
No, I show up at your house, you got country crock or whatever. I'm Uber Eats and dinner.
Have it all.
Yeah, that's very important what you cook with. Olive oil, guys, I do buy nice olive oil because I think it matters.
I don't understand why olive oil is so expensive.
Because most of the time when you're buying cheap olive oil, it's fake. It's like what's that called?
Yeah, but
Just
cheap olive oil is still like $10. Like that's crazy.
yeah, I know. It is crazy.
I don't want to pay $20 for an olive oil can. I mean, I
It just
do, but then it doesn't last long.
takes a lot of olives.
It does.
Takes
You
a
gotta
lot of
juice
olives,
those
that's
things,
right.
man. You juice them.
Yeah. No, you oil them. You gotta oil them. Yeah, it's just like that. That's how you do it.
You milk the olives. Any more?
Reminds me of that one meme. It's like almond milk, and they're like, almonds don't even have titties.
I still, I still can't get over that you said Heinz ketchup and toilet paper at the same time.
I really thought we were gonna be on sync with that.
That was my first
I
one.
did not think we were, but you insisted.
The toilet paper seems like the most obvious thing to say in this whole situation. Like honestly, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Yeah, I didn't prepare. I didn't prepare anything
No,
other
we
than
know.
other than toilet paper.
No, we know. We know. We
I
know.
just I, I don't know. I just thought that would hit so well that
So you started reading. You started reading groceries.
I was just reading
Bell peppers,
GPT.
eggs,
It really
milk.
sucked.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. For more information about this case, you can check us out on our website at overmydeadpod.com or on our social medias. Give us a shout out. We're on everything. And we will see you guys back next week with part two. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.